In Barotac Nuevo, Mr. Mateo Reyes taught English with passion, but carried a quiet burden. His accent, pure Ilonggo, was often called wrong. He wondered if he was teaching a broken language, but realized his English was his mother's at the market, his father's bedtime stories, his community's voice. Mateo stopped correcting accents and started celebrating them, teaching his students that their voices were not mistakes, but their identity. His quiet rebellion sent ripples far beyond his classroom, challenging what proper English truly means. It was a humid Tuesday in Mr. Reyes's classroom. Ana, nervous, stood to present her poem, apologizing for her English. Mr. Reyes stepped beside her, saying, "Your English tells your story." He told the class, "Our language is a beautiful mix. Never be ashamed." Paulo recorded the moment and posted it online. By morning, it had gone viral, uniting millions with pride in their identity. Mateo Reyes became a local celebrity after his video went viral. The mayor shook his hand. News crews arrived at his school. The principal handed him an envelope from Oxford. It was an invitation to speak at Oxford. Mateo was shocked and anxious. He felt the weight of representing his community. This was his chance to share his lesson globally. Mateo's journey from Barotac Nuevo to Oxford was a series of firsts. His first flight, leaving behind the warmth of home for the cold, ancient city of spires. He felt small and out of place, but remembered he was here for every Filipino told to fix their accent. In the end, Mateo found resolve. He would speak at Oxford, sounding proudly like himself. Mateo stood in the old Oxford Hall, heart pounding, facing a sea of academics. He set aside his notes and spoke from the heart, sharing stories of his Filipino home. How English, there is not just a tool, but a language of family, laughter, and prayer. "My accent is my story," he declared. When he finished, silence fell. Then a standing ovation. The impact of Mateo's speech was immediate and seismic. It was more than just a moving talk. It was a catalyst for institutional change. The symposium, which had started as a dry academic conference, turned into a global conversation about linguistic justice. News of the standing ovation for a humble Filipino teacher spread like wildfire. Major news outlets from the BBC to CNN ran stories with headlines like, "The teacher who taught Oxford a lesson." The video of his speech, filmed by the university, went even more viral than his original classroom video, reaching tens of millions of people worldwide and sparking debates in staff rooms and living rooms everywhere. The most significant response came from the Oxford English Dictionary Committee itself, which had been present at the symposium. Moved and challenged by Mateo's words, they announced an unprecedented move. They would be fast-tracking a comprehensive review and expansion of Filipino English entries in the OED. It was a formal admission that they, the gatekeepers, had been too slow to recognize the legitimacy and vibrancy of this major global variant of English. They weren't just adding a few token words. They were launching a dedicated project to document the unique vocabulary, grammar, and expressions of Filipino English. The announcement was a formal act of validation on a global scale. Oxford didn't just ape their words, they published new ones. Words like KKB, Kanya-Kanyang Bayad, or Each One Pays Their Own. Hikay, a stylish, girly woman, and dirty kitchen, a secondary kitchen for everyday cooking, were officially recognized. The committee publicly credited Mr. Mateo Reyes, stating that his eloquent defense of linguistic identity had compelled them to re-evaluate their own frameworks. They acknowledged that language authority doesn't just flow from centers like Oxford and Cambridge. It also grows organically in places like Manila, Cebu, and even little Barotac Nuevo. This decision sent shockwaves through the academic world and beyond. Other English-speaking countries with their own unique dialects, from Jamaica to Singapore to Nigeria, felt seen and validated. Teachers of English as a second language across the globe began re-examining their methods, shifting from a focus on accent reduction to accent appreciation. Mateo's single speech had triggered a domino effect. pushing the world towards a more inclusive and realistic understanding of what it means to speak English in the 21st century. It was a clear signal that the days of a single, monolithic Queen's English were over. The family of Englishes was growing, and Filipino English had finally been given its seat at the head table. The news from Oxford echoed loudest back home in the Philippines. It was a moment of immense national pride, a collective exhale after decades of quiet insecurity. For so long, the Filipino relationship with English had been complicated, a mix of pride in their fluency and shame in their imperfect delivery. Now, the highest authority on the language had declared their English not just acceptable, but noteworthy and distinct. It was a cultural vindication. On social media, the hashtag Filipino English is global trended for weeks. Filipinos from all walks of life, celebrities, politicians, students, and overseas workers shared their own stories of linguistic shame and newfound pride. The transformation was most profound in the classrooms. Teachers across the archipelago, inspired by Mateo, began to adopt his philosophy. They printed out lists of the newly recognized Filipino English words and hung them on their walls. They encouraged students to write stories using the language they spoke at home, a vibrant mix of English, Tagalog, and other local dialects. The fear that had once paralyzed students like Anna began to melt away. A new generation of young Filipinos started to see their voice not as a liability, but as a superpower. They spoke with more confidence, their natural lilt no longer a source of embarrassment but a badge of honor. Mateo Reyes returned to Barotac Nuevo not as a celebrity but as a hero. He was still the same humble teacher, but something in him had changed. The quiet burden of self-doubt was gone, replaced by a deep, unshakable sense of purpose. He saw his work not just as teaching grammar and vocabulary, but as nurturing identity and building confidence. His story became a parable, a lesson that your origins do not define your worth, and that your unique voice has the power to change the world. He proved that you don't need a perfect accent to have a perfect message. Ultimately, this was a story about more than just words. It was about seeing oneself clearly and with pride. The recognition of Filipino English was a recognition of the Filipino people, their history of resilience, their creativity, their warmth, and their unique place in the global community. It was a collective transformation of national identity, a realization that their voice, exactly as it is worthy, powerful, and deserves to be heard. And it all started with one teacher, in one small classroom, who dared to believe that the sound of home was a beautiful thing.